Great.
Hey, so thank you for the
Okay,
opportunity
well,
to come and chat with you on this.
I'm really excited. I'm doing some research to help create some product management curriculum and also maybe some content around what makes really great product managers.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've found in some of my research and reading is there's not a lot of perspective from the software developer about what makes a great product manager, which is ridiculous and not that surprising, because in a lot of ways, the product manager is completely useless without being able to motivate and engage the dev team.
Hmm.
And so I have a list of questions that I ask different devs, and I thought you'd be particularly excited to talk to because you have a lot of extensive training in Agile. You're a lot of fun to work with, and I know you've
Thank
worked in a
you.
lot of different organizations, and I think you might have a lot of color to add.
I'll happily do my best.
Okay. So one of the first questions I had is, as a developer, what motivates you to go to work hard? Like, what makes you tick?
So I admit, I think this is going to end up varying by every developer. For me personally, it ends up being building something more than just the code I'm writing on the page. Yeah, I like to write code. I like to solve the hard problems, and I use the code as a tool to do that. But for me personally, I've noticed a lot that I want to know what the thing I am building is for. Why am I building it this way? What is the point? I've actually even started modifying my resume for this, where I will include, here's what I believe the business impact of me writing code for you was, because I'm worth more than just the fact you paid me for n hours of sitting in front of a computer, right?
Makes sense. Yeah. So interesting that you're touching on business impact. How have you learned about business impact? Why is that important to you?
A few years into working as a developer, I kind of realized that no one was able to tell me why exactly we were writing this code. So I started hanging out with the product owners who were on my team and asking, why am I writing this? Why are we doing this at all? And they started explaining all of the business use case behind the product I was writing. And that made it easier for me to do my job, because at the time I was working on an oil and gas software, which was written for a desktop environment. I'm like, why? Who's using this? Who are these people? And they explained, you're writing this for geophysicists. There's a reason this thing is so math heavy, and why we have to get it exactly though. Like, oh, that explains then this other detail. By the way, we probably want to look at this. And it was through the conversations that I learned how to do my job better, and it helped me connect to the piece I was missing for, why are you making me do this the hard way?
Yep. Okay, so this brings up a point. So I just got off a call with an engineer
Mm-hmm.
who is a CEO at a small company, and he brought up this really thing that resonated with me. And he said that he feels like a lot of times the engineers are treated like the children of the organization, and they can't sit at the adult table. He thinks this stems from a lack of business understanding. So let's think about something. So an engineer is sitting in the same room as the CEO, and the CEO is like, "Hey, I want to solve X problem," and then the engineer is like, "We're going to need to make sure our database runs really quickly. We're going to need this really fancy. We want to make sure we upgrade to React. We're going to getting in all the tech details about something that probably someone like a producer can connect the dots and show that these two super related conversations."
Mm-hmm.
CEOs talking about revenue and customers and business impact, and the devs talking about technical implementation. And this gap ends up leaving the industry treated like a child. Does this resonate with you? Have you ever experienced this? What do you think about this?
Yes, I can say I've experienced this. I think he's on the right track for what I believe the cause is. I think you need to go a couple steps deeper, because it's more than just the fact that we don't have the business acumen. They know. That's why they hired us for development, not for sales. But when you mentioned in that conversation, the stuff he's talking about is what's important to him, not what's important to the CEO. And what I've seen a lot of times when that conversation ends up happening between a developer and a business entity is that we miss. Like, we're talking this way and they're talking this way, and because we're not talking the same language. And I think the real thing that could be beneficial is if the developers can learn to talk about the things which matter. For example, why do you want to upgrade your database performance? Well, it will make our page load times faster. Why does that matter? Because it will improve user retention. That is something that a business person might actually care about. but you have to do the legwork to get them there. Because you can understand the connection because you're the technical side, but you have to help them understand the connection you're seeing.
And I guess just what was striking me was that it's almost like a lot of times the engineers aren't brought in at a point where they can even get context into the business need or what the potential impact is.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they're relegated to the kids' table, like where it's like, sit down and just do what I'm telling you. And how long will it take you? No, do it faster.
Okay, hold on. Can I jump on that one?
Oh, yeah.
That actually does happen. But the reason I think it's ended up happening is a bad habit that we have convinced both sides to work in. Developers, when we're writing code, we don't want people to come back at us and tell us, but you did it wrong. I did exactly what you told me to do. Yeah, but you did it the wrong way. But we agreed. And that conversation hurts enough for the developers, so now we say, no, you have to be very specific, which causes distance between us and the business. And now the business comes and says, okay, now in order to get anything to you, I have to have all of these long strings worked out. So I'm not going to involve you when I'm thinking about it. I'm going to involve you when I know. And at which point, it's not a conversation about how can we build this together. It's, I need you to do this. You're on contract. Go and do it faster. Because we have relegated ourselves to a position of, you're just another warm body in this to produce a thing. That COGS problem comes partly out of how we have interacted with the business in the past and taught them to behave with us. I think, but I'm not certain, that the way to escape that and have the ability to have the conversation at the place where we can get the context for why does the business want this is to talk to them in such a way that they understand we're human too, that we realize that they're human too, and we're not gonna play this fiddly game where it's a bad marriage. Well, you said, but no, I really meant none of that. Hey, I know you don't quite know what you want. I don't know quite what you want either, but let's try and figure this out together, and I'm going to make my best attempt, and I'm going to trust you to understand I'm making my best attempt. And then when we develop this language and we develop a better pattern for interacting with each other, there is the chance that now we're brought in at the stage where we believe our ideas will have the most impact about choosing where they want to go rather than simply reacting with the statement of, I want to buy this.
That makes sense. One of the problems is, like, I've worked in environments that are highly collaborative with the devs.
Mm-hmm.
At best, I get 2 devs in a meeting whenever I'm having these ideation sessions. But in reality, I'm 10, maybe 15 building it.
Mm-hmm.
About the not so senior developer stations.
So that gets into a conversation about roles. And so I'm going to kind of paint what I see about it. I can't say that this is the one or even the best way to do it, but it is what I have seen work in the past. The team, if you take an agile team, they're supposed to be self-organizing. Now, by self-organizing, that can be meaning a whole lot of things, but let's assume that a backlog is being provided to them and that they're getting to work closely with their product owner. The team lead is accountable for all of the things we said we were going to get done, but they're not responsible for writing all of it. His role is not to write it. Not necessarily. He may have a thing which it is his role to write it, but not all of it. His role is to make the team able to write it. This can mean moving out and providing training to make certain that that one weak link on the team who can't do the UI stuff now can do the UI stuff. It may mean providing training that, hey guys, we're about to use this new library. Here's what I have found and what we're about to go do with it. It could mean something else entirely, like, okay, a third-party API we have to go interact with is not following contract. Let's go fix that while you guys go and do real work. Now, when I say real work, that was the words that my team lead used to use for it because he didn't feel like that was his job. But it was the role that was most effective at contributing value to the team. And that's the shift in mindset, I think, is the way to help the junior dev who wasn't brought into the conversation. Your mindset should be on, how am I producing value? The senior dev is brought in because they are able to produce value in meetings like that because they have the context, because they have the experience, because they have the trust or the relationships necessary for people to believe that they can produce value in that meeting. If a junior dev feels put upon because he's asked to do mostly rather than to think, it's a matter of build up your skills, build up your relationships so that people know you produce value when you think. Now, of course, everyone does that to some degree. The trick is building up the confidence in the organization that has hired you so that that is what they really want to pay you to do.
To think and just do.
To think more and do a little less, which is what a team lead usually is there for.
Yeah. So that, another concept, this kind of brings up a quite stories. So in a lot of the questions I've asked and a lot of the research that I've found, not super surprised, one of the big pet peeves and frustrations that engineers have in a is when they're told how to do it. The story that is written to them is prescriptive and how to build something as opposed to saying what they want built. On how this negatively impacts motivation or how it feels. So I think I get do philosophically, but I really want to from the dev perspective, like what is
Okay. So with the understanding that we're talking about user stories, I'm going to kind of constrain it to that topic right now. User stories have a purpose. Now, one of my favorite all-time POs used to tell it like this: user stories and effectively everything written down in Agile is a placeholder for a conversation. Wonderful advice.
Yeah.
But let's be a little more specific. A user story is about a why. It is about as a user, I need to see this thing. Or if I can't, I'm not getting the business value. So a good way to phrase it is that in order to save on shipping costs, as a shipping manager, I want to remove duplicate addresses because I don't want to send them out multiple times. Okay, that's a why. That is a motivating why. I am helping the business because I save them on shipping costs. But when you come in and prescriptively tell me, you shall have a red button left center of the box and it shall read, you're now telling me how and telling me what. So what am I here for? Oh, right, I'm here as your little code monkey. And that's where it kind of gets our hackles raised. That's not what my job is. In Agile, if I'm supposed to be a self-organizing team, ideally, you have the why coming in the story and the developers work on the how. We tell you, here's the limits of our technology. Here's how we can best meet that need. And when you come in with a super prescriptive story, it is a statement on multiple fronts. The first one is, this is the thing that you shall do. I don't care what your system can or cannot do, or even what if it's easy or beneficial to do, you will do this, which ignores all of the things that are in our field of concern. It further goes and says, by the way, I don't trust you to think. I want you to do exactly as you're told, which removes from most engineers the primary internal motivator of solving hard problems.
And so there's something that you're touching on, which is hard problems. Now, what is the type of problem that an engineer is really interested in solving, you think? Or for you, what are the types of problems that you're really interested in?
So I admit that has shifted over time. There was a time where, so I will describe a story I was given at one point, which is we wanted to change our licensing structure. We don't want to license by feature anymore. We want to license by the kind of person we expect is using this, because there's a wide band of features that they need. So we want to give those to them, but not all of them. And we want to sell like a basic and an advanced of this thing. Okay, that was a fun, hard problem 3 years ago, because it had me exploring the whole application, rebuilding the permission structure, and kind of implementing it everywhere. And the thing that made that hard was, okay, you have a design. Now you need to go find everywhere to put it in. As time has gone on, the kind of problems I've become more interested in are, how do I manipulate the data that I have to get you the answer you need? An example of that kind of story came in where a third-party API tells me, these are the things we have in the warehouse to sell. This side over here tells me, here are the combinations of things you're allowed to sell ever. And I need to take the information of what's in the warehouse and the information of the relations between, here are the things that you have ever able to sell, and make it so that I don't show the user options that aren't in the warehouse. How do I take these two pieces of data, combine them, and produce a thing that is performant and can still get that result, and hopefully be able to do it in a couple of places? Those are very different problem scopes. And as I have been in my career, that shifted. There are devs I know who like to primarily occupy themselves with data structures and the creation of effective databases. That's their cup of tea. I've seen engineers who are willing to dig down, and what their definition of a hard problem is to rebuild the application in a new framework. Not my cup of tea, but dude went ham on it. He had a great deal of fun. And there are benefits to those. The best thing I can say is when you're looking for how to meet that story developer need is to realize that, like, even as a developer, I realize I'm not going to get my hard problems 100% of the time. But having the potential of a hard problem coming up in the story completely yanked hurts. But I go through the crust of stories so I can get those couple of golden nuggets that are that is the thing I wanted to spend my time doing.
Okay, so thinking about Agile, I want to go through the ceremonies and just talk about maybe peeves or ways that PMs might really derail stuff. And I don't mean to be just bashing PMs, but I do think really focusing on the types of bad habits that they have and exploring it can help enhance PM curriculum. So let's start it off with sprint planning. What's a bad habit or just something that's not great that PMs do during sprint planning?
If you are just running through the stories, you're not interested in, like, if you can't answer the questions that come up during sprint planning, because the goal of sprint planning is, here is the chunk of work we think we can get done in the next iteration. If you can't tell me the whys behind a story, because it may have been weeks since the last time I looked at this when we were doing backlog refinement, or it just may be that maybe this is shifted. But having a good knowledge of why this story was added and what value to the customer or end user it will have really helps me figure out, okay, that's about the direction I need to go on the story. It also helps when you can have that conversation about a little bit about priority, right? Because sometimes when you get to sprint planning, something is shifted in the architecture that when we did this wasn't a dependency, and now it is. Hey, before you get that, I have to go fix this because there's like maybe a performance problem and this thing won't run unless that's fixed. Or maybe where we put that data shifted from when we planned it. But being able to have that conversation is important. If you're only there for hurry up, sit down, shut up, get it, market, and get it done, Taskmaster PMs aren't great.
There is, I asked you some of these questions digitally, and you sent me some answers. And one of the things you said was that you like to have PM kind of show you what's going on in their world. And I was imagining a sprint planning scenario where I know that 50% of these stories are at risk to just be pulled, but we have to operate as if it's not going to happen because we're going to get, you know how this goes. It's like possible, this is all at risk. And can you just give me some context as to, like, from the developer perspective, like when you want that information delivered? Why is it important?
So why is it important and when it's delivered are pretty tightly tied. Think of it like this, right? You are getting ready to move into a new house. You have basically everything ready to go. The papers are practically signed. There's just some details in the air that you know about. And you have your entire life packed into boxes and you're into the moving truck. And at that point, a lawyer comes up and says, hey, that house you wanted to buy, it's gone. Like, just gone. Out of nowhere. We don't know where, but we wanted you to sign to say we weren't in trouble for it. That feeling you get almost immediately, like, what? The house I just bought is gone? Is the kind of feeling that a developer can get when I have now gone through the rigmarole of 2 weeks working on this very hard bit of code, and you just told me, dump it. Now, that kind of answers the question of when do you want to tell me before I've started? Tell me that there is an 80% chance this thing may get pulled, and then tell me what might cause it to pull. And maybe you and I can talk about ways to mitigate the risk to the sprint, because the last thing the company wants to do is spend 2 weeks of my salary for nothing.
Yep.
And so the best thing we can do is to have that conversation early and have a very real conversation about the likelihood of the risk and the things that the team can do to control it. Maybe we don't take in all of those stories until we know that decision. Maybe we just take the first few and we start on another dependency chain. But that's a conversation that you can only have if the devs are informed there's an 80% risk that this thing will just disappear.
Right. Makes sense. So I was imagining that maybe sprint planning is one of those places where you can have this conversation, right? Where you're like laying out all the stuff. Sometimes what I've done is been like, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do during the sprint. It's possible we have to pull a bunch of stuff. If so, this is the stuff we're going to work on instead.
Yes.
But here's the priority. Here's how we're going to go forward. And this is why everything's at risk.
Yes, and having that out in the air builds trust between you and your team. And that's the thing that's going to make this whole run work. Because now you've told me I am allowed to be informed. You're not trying to hide something from me. You're not trying to say, yeah, but ignore that you just spent 2 weeks of your life doing nothing. Well, now you're saying that is important enough to me, and the fact that this is at risk is important enough to me to let you know. We are in this together, and that is a wonderful thing to build.
Okay, so someone told me that during sprint planning, they once had a very technical product manager who 95% of the time was completely correct when they alluded to the complexity of a story.
Mm-hmm.
And that 5% of the time that this technical product manager was wrong and generally underestimating complexity, which is how we tend to go, it was incredibly unnerving. It was unsettling. It was like, am I dumb? Do I not know how to build this fast enough? Am I not good enough? And it was really upsetting to this developer because they started to question their own code because they thought maybe they were missing something.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever experienced something like that, or does this resonate with you?
I have had one circumstance where the PO was somewhat technical. Now, when I say that circumstance, he was not what seems to be the case for this other developer where he was very technical. The kind of PO we're talking about had done it a little bit and then had gone into the business more and left the development back a couple years back. Mm-hmm. But the best thing I can rely on, again, is know your role. It's not the PM's job to estimate complexity. It's not their job. They shouldn't be in it. They shouldn't be doing it. The only thing they should be asking. And if they genuinely have a deep experience in the area, they can coach the team on it, but they should not provide the estimates. Now, when I say coach, the way you can adjust for this is ask questions. If you think there's something the team is missing here, or maybe like you remember, hey, last time we tried to do something like this or sounded something like this, it took you guys extra work because we missed this. Bringing back that memory for the team can be a useful way to help the team learn. That's definitely something a PO really wants because it will make for a more effective team as you go over time. But as far as like getting disconcerted on the thing, no. Your role as a developer is to see what's going on, and if you're encountering something, chances are it's real. Now, if you're really missing something, go talk to your dev lead. Their role is to help individual developers be more effective. That may mean teaching. That may mean, yeah, you're going about this that way, go this way. And that's okay. But don't be afraid to have the conversation.
So I totally agree that the product manager should not be estimating. It's obvious. Sometimes it's only a priority if it's...
Oh.
I knew you'd hate this. Okay, talk to me about this.
So the whole concept of it's only a priority if it is in the PO's realm to estimate priority. However, it is beneficial for the entire group to know where that's coming from, right? Like, what metric do we use to say this is higher priority than that? Now, the best language I have had ever for this conversation to happen, both from the devs and having them actually be useful in the conversation, and for the POs to talk in the same language, is talk about bets. Every user story, every feature is really, especially for new product development, is a bet. I think this will pay off. And I think this will pay off more than that sets a feature above another. For stories, now you're flipping because it's no longer about priority, it's about dependency. In order to provide you this feature, which is the bet, I first have to provide you this. And now we're not talking about priorities. We're talking about dependency trees, which, yes, if you are a product owner who has some project management experience, you'll remember these from N numbers of training and a very specific kind of graph that I'm thinking of. I want to say it's a Gantt chart. But it's no longer your input that tells that. It's now development. But that's where things get a little funny, because now there's a dance. When you say this is a higher value bet than this one, good. Now let me show you what it takes to get that bet is this long tent. I don't like that because that's too high cost from what I estimated. Okay, we deprioritize that and we bring the other one in. And now we have the dependency conversation here. But it helps to recognize that you're switching between concepts when you're talking about the bet. One bet is talking about the priority for the estimated profitability or value of the story or feature. The other side is, this is what we have to do to get you there. It is now talking about cost, reward, cost. POs are supposed to make decisions for their reward to cost ratios. Devs are supposed to inform their POs to help them see the cost. Now, sometimes this can get flipped further on its head when the devs have a bead on something that's really cheap to do. And what we need to do is help the PO see, hey, I think that cost ratio is actually much smaller than you think it is. But that's a conversation because it is still in the PO's role and their purview to choose the prioritization. As long as we're not interfering with, in order to get you that, we have to get you these.
Okay, so piggybacking off this concept of roles and concept of roles, I have heard various perspectives on whether or not a product manager belongs in daily Scrum, whether or not product managers should be participating in Scrum, and just all these different opinions on experience, what's effective for the team.
Oh, okay. So this one's going to be a little bit of a long answer, but I will try and hone it first on the daily stand-up, the Scrum ceremony. Is the product manager a member of the team or not? Now, when I say that, there is the natural reaction, of course they're a member of the team. But I want you to ask that from the team's perspective. Has there been that relationship that's been established that, yes, they are with us. It's not them and us, it's us or we. And if you can develop that kind of an identity, then yes, 100% I believe the product manager, product owner belongs in the daily Scrum. It helps them keep a pulse on what's going on. And if the team runs into something headlong, the product owner gets informed immediately, not later, which builds that trust again with the team and the product owner. But there is a purpose behind Scrum, and I kind of alluded to this in my answers to you earlier. But the purpose of that meeting is not to change priorities. It's not to discuss priorities. It's not even necessarily to get a business update. It is to talk about and to create alignment within the team. It's to talk about, here's what I have done. Here's the kind of things I'm looking at doing today that I expect to get done. And by the way, here's where I'm stuck. I need your help. Now, the PO, I would recommend, if they think they want to develop that kind of spirit to core with their devs, please come to Scrum, but start listening. And don't take notes. That's scary. That's going to get people defensive.
Yeah. Don't take notes. I love it.
Right? Because then it feels like the clipboard. You're marking me for my, deductions. But you want to create that sense of safety that you are good peoples, for lack of a better term. And you can do that by not. Go ahead.
All the traits said always show up to stand up, but don't talk. Just listen.
And that's a good place to start. But how would you feel like if every time, say, you and your husband were having dinner and having a conversation, myself or some other person just randomly showed up in the corner and sat there listening? Mum, the whole time. You'd feel like you were on good government surveillance. And so I think a better answer because that is definitely the way to start. But once you've built that safety within the team, and maybe do this by making comments like, hey, that was really neat. Thanks for sharing that. And compliments into the team say, oh, she is paying attention. Now you can build into that positive relationship and hopefully build that understanding that, yeah, I'm here with you guys. I want to know what's going on. Not so I can tell you to change it, but so I can run interference to make certain you're getting what you need. And so the PO that I saw that did this really well by being in daily stand-up would give us updates on the metrics that the team was looking at as our success. How many people are using the app? How long are they staying? Did we sell anything? Because we were working in e-commerce. And so having that was really useful. That was motivating for the team. Hey, guys, that feature you just released converted 5 people the day it was released. Fantastic job. That reward feels good as a developer. Hey, I had an impact. And then we can start surfacing things to you like, hey, that third-party vendor, which, by the way, you have influence to lean on, is giving us trouble. We can't get a meeting with them. Can you help? And that's how the team now starts realizing, oh, you're in this too. How can I help you? And so one of the things that came up was, hey, we were talking about launching new products, right? Well, what if we just plugged in this thing that we already have? And that's the kind of insight that a developer can bring, because I think the data we already have will fit into this. We just need to wire it up. And we uncover a small investment that suddenly sells an entire new product category in this page. But it comes again from having that relationship. You're in this for me, I can be in this for you.
That's cool. Okay. We'll pivot to another ceremony.
Okay.
Retrospective. Once again, this one in my training, the PO definitely belongs in retro and participating in. I've heard about various teams who don't invite the product manager to their retro stuff there. But I was wondering what your perspective is on like how a product manager fits into retro and maybe some of the mistakes they tend to make.
Okay. So again, I will rely on my previous description of, is the product owner, product manager part of the team? Retro is intended as a place for the team to pause, to breathe, and to look back on what has happened, and maybe on how they're doing that, so that they can choose a better path. But what is required in order to do that well is the ability to say, I didn't do so good this time. It's hard to do that in and of itself. If you have someone sitting in the room that you don't trust, it's practically impossible. And so I think there is a lot of benefit for having the product owner in those meetings. But I will say again the same thing I said with Scrum. If you want to be a member of the team first. That's the requirement for admission, and then you need to abide by the rules. Now, when I say the rules, I don't mean literally like if we say stand on your head, you stand on the head. That's silly. But the rules that make retrospective effective. Maintain our psychological safety, because in here, we're all trying to get better, and nobody's going to point fingers at, you suck! We might say, that was not good. We can do better. But we're not going to point it and make it a blame game. Otherwise, it's not safe. We're here to try and to improve, and so we're all willing to change. And whatever we say in here stays in the room and within the team. Because there may be some times, like, I have had people come into retro and say, guys, I sucked it up this sprint because I'm having stuff happen at home. My mom is sick, and I couldn't get care for her. I'm sorry. That got real quick. Mm-hmm. But the only reason they could say that was because they trusted the people in the room, were there to support them, to, for lack of a better term, love on them to help get over the mountain. Now,
yeah, they're not worried they're going to get fired because of saying something in retro.
Exactly. Now, I think that the PO has a place in retro. I genuinely do, once they're part of that team. Once that trust and the I'm in this with you guys, it's a we, not a me, not a you. Now we can start doing something with it. And I think there's actually a lot of value to having the retro run like that. One of the things, though, that I've seen that goes wrong is that when the PO comes in, they expect something of their role to maintain through. The retro is not the product owner or the product manager's meeting. They usually run all of the meetings, but this one isn't one of theirs. This one belongs to the Scrum Master, or by extension, the team. And so how the team chooses to run it is how it needs to go. And there may be that feeling that this is weird or this is awkward. Please don't try and change it. Not until you've gotten really to be part of the team, or like it comes up as the, hey, how should we do this particular meeting better? Then offer it. Once you've had the time to learn how it kind of flows and how it works and why it works that way, then you can have the conversation. With that being the case, sometimes they bring their role into the meeting where the devs are dreaming out loud saying, you know, it'd be great if, and the PO will say, yeah, but we can't do that, guys. We got to focus on this other thing. And that kills the psychological safety to dream, because there's going to be Debbie Downer. And that hurts. That's not what you're intending to do. You're trying to help us stay focused. But the retro isn't about that right now. And so the circumstances change in that meeting, and failing to adapt to those new circumstances is generally where I've seen the hiccup happen.
That makes a lot of sense. Someone else was bringing up another hiccup that happens in retro is that it gets stale. So maybe you've been doing the same format of the meeting over and over again, and it no longer inspires true reflection. People are just going through the motions. What tips or tricks do you have to keep retro spicy?
Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics. I probably actually have a bunch of content. I have given talks on this in the past, but if I had to give you top 3 bits of advice, one, if retro got stale, you need to change it. So, easy example. I took over being the Scrum Master for a team who had gotten used to the bare basics plus minus delta format, right? It's a wonderful format. And when you're, learning to ride a bike, you use training wheels. But if you're stuck there after having been a, so to speak, mature agile team, or like you're just into the cadence now, you're killing yourself. You can't ride faster. And so the first thing you need to do once the team is re-educated on the purpose of the retro is kick it. Do something different. Do something weird. Now, my best advice is remember what the purpose of the retro is. You want to change it to meet the purpose. You don't want to just change it for change's sake. The purpose of the retro is to produce something to improve upon, to produce actions or ideas that the team actually owns to change. So the first major thing I did after getting everyone back into the plus minus delta routine was I added a column because we weren't using the plus minus delta super well. I added the column and I changed the sticky note color for this too and said everyone shall submit one of the pink stickies. And the pink stickies were for ideas. This concept is, hey, everyone, including the POPM, submit an idea for tweaking our process, some change that you would like to see that you think would make it better. Now, I've refined that a little bit to say, let us use the language of an experiment. I want to try X for so much time during, and here's how I know I will be successful. And as long as you can have those metrics and pick like maybe one or two an iteration to try, you're going to see the team start rebuilding itself and it's like, hey, that actually worked. I liked that. That improved my quality of life. I believe I have control again. So change for the right reasons. You have got to change it. 2, and this is a cheap one. If retro is feeling stale, change where you're holding retro.
Yep.
And the first time I tried this, it worked way better than I anticipated. All I did was I had them meet outside on the benches where we eat lunch or where you can eat lunch. And it was like, mid-morning, nice day, little bright. And so, yeah, we had some issues with the sticky notes, but that's fine. But moving them made them realize, hey, we're doing something different right now. We are now in the place for retroing. And it's time to do something different.
That's cool. I like it.
Now, the third one I will offer is intentionally create a format to get the thing you want out of it. I will recommend particularly liberating structures. This is a set of meeting tools which are designed to increase the effectiveness of the meeting by spreading out the participation in it. A couple of really easy ones I can give you right off the bat would be the example of TRIZ, or creative destruction. Basically, don't have people try and solve the problem. Have them try and make it worse first. Then, once they've tried to make it worse, and this ends up being kind of a fun exercise because everyone wants to break it sometimes. Now that they've seen, okay, yeah, I could break it by doing that. Okay. Is anything we're doing even remotely like that? And by allowing them the freedom to look at something in the how do I break it way, you're kind of pulling off the normal, here we go again, I got to get it better. And you're turning some of that pent up into something useful. And it can be a fun way to watch people get creative. There are, of course, other liberating structures, but those kind of things which force people to change by creating a structure for them to act in a certain role helps them now think in a different way. It has been my habit that every 2 or 3 retros, I would change the format intentionally. We also had the point where we were rotating who was Scrum Master within the team as a way to create this change in structure to build the team up into this is not just us sitting on our hands. We're here to do something.
That's great. Okay, very cool. I like it. I want to pivot to demo.
Demo.
Yeah.
Demo.
So, and I want to. There's a lot to say in demo,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to focus specifically on the relationship between the product manager and the software engineer in demo, and
Okay.
maybe really in preparation for demo. But what do you think is really important for a product manager to know when they are um, creating a demo, prepping for demo, setting a dev up for demo?
Okay. So I came from a client that used to have the devs give the demo to the internal group as a good way to practice public speaking skills and generally just make it so it's not onerous on any one dev. The best thing I can give you as the core for demo is you need to be able to tell the story. I, as the dev, am trying to present why each of these stories exist. And the best way myself and a mentor figured out how to do this was to tell a through line story of, hey, I'm this guy who now needs to go find out how to get whatever it is. And the first one I find in the store, this first associate, works in a completely different place. But we wrote this tool that he just starts and asks me a couple of questions. It's like a questionnaire, and he fills it out, and he's able to say, here's what I think you need. Let's go find it, because he knows how to do that in the store. And now, the thing that gets a business interest is I have people who can sell that now. And as a person who's a customer, I can actually get my questions answered. I don't have to be bounced through these departments. It's just a streamlined process, which is great. But the story is what sells it. Because most of the time, the bad habits that devs will get into is, and we did this, and if you'll watch, and then I click the reload button. And there you see the calculation has occurred. And that's boring. And it hurts. And the devs don't like it. The PMs don't like it. Everybody hates doing that. Tell me a story. Tell me why you did that thing. And that's the most valuable thing that the dev-PM relationship can build. Because if we're talking to each other, we can have the conversation about how do I tell a story about that? Because it's in the PM's best interest that it's well presented, that our team looks like we're successful. And it's in the dev's interest not to be boring. And so the best thing I can say is when you're trying to help prepare that, help us find a story that's motivating behind this. If we're writing good user stories, that should be pretty easy. The trick is just creating a scenario where all of these get hit. And given the way that normally we set up our priorities and the normal way we set up our dependencies, they're naturally going to be in the same workflow most of the time. Sometimes you need to tell two stories, but still tell the story with your demo, and you will have a more compelling demonstration.
I like it. Okay, so it's really about storytelling, less about showing like this is specifically what we built, and then
Yep, because you want to focus on the value you're building, not the fact that you wrote neat code. There are demos for that, but those are different. If you're doing a demonstration in the classic sense, you're demonstrating for people who are supposed to represent the customers.
Okay, so here's another, there's two more topics I want to cover that I think are sensitive in the relationship between an engineer and developer.
Okay.
Or an engineer and the business, really. One of them is that oftentimes the software team is treated as just cogs. Like you can mix them together however you want. You can put them, you can throw as many together to get them to build more.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering if you can maybe share some experience you had with that, and what is that this happens, like when people just mix up the teams. But I think there's more subtle ways this feeling is evoked that business people aren't aware of.
Sure. So I'll try and cover the broad cases and boil down to the specific ones if I can. I'll start with the really easy one. I have seen the 9-woman problem solution more times than I'd care to count, where people will say, hey, it's going to take us 18 months to build this with our 6-man team. And they say, excellent, we'll hire 12 more, and it'll take 6 months. And it takes 2 years. There is a diminishing returns that comes with just throwing people at the problem. I mean, just if you want to boil it down to cost, there's a setup cost to get people going. There's, of course, getting them all working on the same thing. But then you incur this hidden little extra something, an alignment cost. Because having 6 people, we can maintain a really tight cadence. We know exactly what we need to do, and we'll have the full thing going because we all have the vision. And then you get 18 of us, and now you need 3 team leads-ish, and all 3 team leads need to have the vision. And by the way, there's that one guy who never gets his code right. And creating the alignment between an organization like that and creating an alignment with a team is a very different beast. And very often what we'll fail at is recognizing that I can't just solve the problem by throwing more resources at it. It is not a manufacturing problem. And I think that's where most of the problems end up coming in, where the common understanding I have seen, this is not to bash on existing management instruction, but if you come at it with the assumption that we are going to use industrial age management techniques to solve computer and people related problems, where what you really need are the minds engaged, not merely the fingers on keys, we're going to fail. And that's where a lot of these hiccups come in, because the classic problem of I need a baby in a month, quick, get me 9 women, doesn't work. Now, taking that the next step. Okay, so if this group is really, really effective and these other 2 are so-so, I'm going to split this group up so that these 2 people from each of those teams can teach the entire group how to be more effective altogether. Is missing that there is a certain je ne sais quoi in the fact that those 6 people together were really effective that you need to look at. It is not that these 6 people know that their process made them more effective. It could have been their relationships. And those aren't quantifiable. They're not something you're going to see. So if you start seeing a productive metric, look deeper. Do the 5 whys analysis. How many times can you ask the right question, why, and get to a real answer? Because the real answer, very likely, isn't simply going to be a repeatable thing in the sauce. It will be because the team lead recognized his role and served it in a way that spoke volumes of trust and care to the developers under him. The developers under him were all capable, that they were set up in roles themselves that were set up to win. For example, not all developers are created equal. Just taking a base skill set, right? You got the junior, you got the senior, and then you got the team lead. Those 3 are not equal. You cannot bring a junior and expect him to do a team lead job. If that's the case, there is also a variation within it, because every junior engineer is not the same. There were people who were self-taught and came from like literally internet tutorials. Myself. There were people who came through classical education and they have this level of skill. And then there are those guys who kind of hacked it together and used to be in academia, and they have a completely different set of skills. But forging those into an effective team requires recognizing the skill, recognizing the temperament of the individual, and then setting them up in a role within the group to succeed. There will be that guy who can always spot the thing that's off at 1,000 paces. There will be that guy who is really, really good at give him a problem and then get out of the way, because you don't want to micromanage him. And of course, if you micromanage that guy, he's less effective. And the guy who's able to spot the problem at 1,000 paces, if you tell him, yeah, hold on, we'll get there, you disregard his gift. Building effective teams is not just put these 3 pegs together, you get a team lead, 2 senior devs, and 3 juniors, and you're golden. That's not how it works. You do need people capable of serving in that capacity, but the kind of people you put there tells how the team's going to behave. And every one of those teams is a tiny little microorganism of culture. You need to recognize the cultures you're building by putting people together before you start mixing them. I'm currently at a client where that happened again, where we had 3, now we have 2 for the stuff that's happening outside. But there wasn't quite the understanding that, by the way, shoving these people into the group does not mean that the group is the same anymore. They're going to start behaving differently. Now, for some groups, that was beneficial, and it worked really well. For other groups, there was a little bit of a hiccup in the engine until it finally got, and we're on again. And you have to anticipate every time you change a personnel in the group, whether because they're left or they're on vacation for a long while, or like you hired someone new, the team re-enters one of the earlier team development stages. As a nice shorthand, there are generally 4 stages: forming, storming, norming, performing. You enter the forming stage almost instantaneously as soon as these people are put in a room and said, you're a team. Okay, and now you're into the storming phase where everyone tries to figure out, who are you? How do I interact with you? How do I feel safe and comfortable with you? And where can I flex and be comfortable in this team? And people who are good at fitting in many teams will chameleon to the role that's available to them. I personally don't do that as well because I tend to be one of the dominant voices. But that changes the mix when I walk in because now there's another dominant voice.
Right.
Now, to get to the norming is what happens after a team has done that for a while and we all kind of figured out a comfortable role for us. And there will be a common pace at which they'll work. What we really want, if we really want to get effective development, is to get into the performing team. But you can't create more performing teams by breaking an existing one and sprinkling them everywhere. And It's that kind of concept that can work its way into the very language that the management may talk about the teams with. We had this project and we were staffing up for it. Ooh, staffing up. We weren't looking for the right people to go make it successful. We were staffing up. You're just staff. That hurts. Or, hey, so guys, we had a resource to project issue. Oh, so now I'm a resource. That doesn't feel particularly good either. I'm a human being, thank you. And the way in which we talk about how we are addressing the needs of the business needs to shift if we really want to show them that we think of them as something more than just a cog. And admittedly, there is a certain amount of reduction that I'm doing on this. Not all management behaves like that, and not all management that is trained classically is going to behave like that. But those are where I'm seeing most of these common issues coming from, a misapplication of the training to a problem space that doesn't function quite like that.
So you have the concept of, we have this really great team that's performing, let's break them up and spread it out so that everyone will perform well. That's one problem. Another problem is using the concept of like staffing up or deploying resources and just using language like that that's really calling the engineers a cog.
Yep. Now, to add one element to that, there is some truth that the project needs a certain amount of people to help make it effective. If all you're doing is trying to get the right number of bodies, you have instantly told me that what you're looking at is a cog, not building a team that can get you that product at the end. There are projects I have seen that would have been more effective if you had just left 6 people, not an entire department, just 6 people to work on this problem. And they would have had a better solution for you faster than the entire department would have if you had looked for the right people. Now, that is hard because it's much easier to look at our world and generally to model things as a team is a unit or people is a unit, but they have these same skills, they should be interchangeable. But just because somebody has the same things listed on LinkedIn doesn't mean that they're going to come at the problem the same way I do. And that's scary, especially if you're a hiring manager trying to figure out, how am I going to find this mythical right person to fit the role? Now, generally, the only answer I've found for that is do more and better interviewing, but even that takes time and is hard. So I'm not saying that that's the only end-all be-all problem.
There's disparity between those who interview well and those who work really hard.
Yep. And so what you need to do is adjust your interview to help you find the people that your culture needs. But not everyone's recognizing that they necessarily have a culture, or that the culture that they have is important for the kind of people who will be successful there.
Cool. Well, this has been super helpful. Thank you for sharing so much.
It's been a pleasure.